Good morning, Wind Chasers. Welcome to another episode of Chasing the Wind. I'm Pastor Mark. Have a little trouble with my voice these days. It's Western New York in the spring, and that's what happens. So I'll go until I feel like I can't. So just want to talk to you today. Last week, Andrew and I were talking on one of the countercultures about sovereignty. And there are a couple different approaches to it. And of course, there's a lot of aspects to sovereignty, divine sovereignty, I should say, not like the King of England sovereignty, but that might actually be a little bit of what we need to talk about today. I want to start a little conversation about it. And so when we talk about sovereignty, it is an interesting conversation to have. Doing a little research on this, one of the things that I understand is that Calvinists, Reformed theologians, and folks tend to think of sovereignty from the idea of a monarch, someone who is a royalty, king, something like that. And Wesleyans, which I tend to lean toward, not lean toward, I just sit there sometimes, most of the time. See sovereignty, see God as a loving parent. And the key difference there that kind of drives that is Wesley, who was a hair's breadth, we are told, from being a Calvinist, because of the issue of free will. So, as I talk to people, we will talk about the idea: God is all knowing, God is all powerful, and He is all present. He's everywhere, and we may get into that here in the next few weeks. We're going to kind of see where this sovereignty thing goes, but I want to start with this idea of monarch. When I think of the monarch, my wife and I used to watch this show out of Scotland years ago. It was a little series, a couple of years, called "The Monarch of the Glen." It was based off the name of the painting, the famous painting, The Monarch of the Glen, which if you want to get into that painting, he's actually a royal of the Glen. He's not a monarch, and I'll let you look up and figure that out. Anyway, not that I digress, as they say. I digress. So when we think of a monarch, and every metaphor falls a little short, and maybe we're not supposed to fully understand the whole sovereignty of God, but let's just start a little conversation here. You don't have to agree with me, but if you do, that's okay. If you don't, that's okay too. When I think of a monarch, I think about, I would have said the Queen of England, but she has since passed, a wonderful lady that she was, or seemed to be, from what we understand. We could think about the King of England now. And so here's the interesting thing. We can sit here and say that God is like a monarch. He's a king, so to speak. And here's the deal with that. The King of England might have all sorts of power. Also, he says jump, everybody says how high, I get that. But it's very interesting. One of my favorite movies is The King's Speech. And there's a scene in there where the king is getting ready to give his biggest speech, the speech. And he's frustrated as he's getting warmed up for it, the scene is. And he says, he's like, I'm a king, I'm a monarch, but I can't declare a war. I can't create a budget. I can't create a government, anything like that. He's just a figurehead. So in one sense, he is powerful. Is he all powerful? Does it mean, though, as many people think, God knows everything I'm thinking. We'll get into that one later too. Knows every decision I'm going to make. That's part of that, omniscience thing. But here's the interesting thing. If we look at that as, maybe we will go there. We'll just see where it goes here for a minute. The King of England is a monarch. He is considered a sovereign. I understand he is not a divine sovereign, but many would say he is there by divine order. But he certainly does not have control over the thoughts of all the people of England and all English territories, Britain's territories. He does not know what they're thinking. He does not know the choices they're going to make. he is still considered the sovereign. So there's some issues that I have with this idea of him being a monarch. Is God worthy of glory and praise? Yes, the monarch, the King of England, will get all sorts of. He gets crowned in here, but sometime in May, with all the pomp and circumstance that go with it. There is an idea that he is worthy of respect, at least until he loses that respect, I guess. But that is where my understanding is Calvinists tend to see. It's not a criticism, it's just putting it out there for you. Wesley would see it, is my understanding, as divine sovereignty being like a loving parent. My parents made decisions for me sometimes, especially when I was a little kid. They made a lot of decisions for me because I wasn't able to make them. But they did not control necessarily my thoughts, know what I was going to do. They learned really quickly, here's, Mark's got a personality all of his own. And we were discussing that down here a little bit about birth order. I'm the youngest. Andrew is the oldest, so he wants the rules, and I'm the youngest. They don't apply to me. So that's kind of fun thinking about that. But as we start this conversation about sovereignty, I think it really causes us to have to give this some thought of what does it mean for God to be sovereign. I have a conversation with a friend of mine sometimes about free will and divine sovereignty, and does God know every decision I'm going to make? And the answer, their answer is, well, yes, he does. And then my response is, well, then we don't have free will then. I don't have it anymore, because if God knows and he is in control and everything is planned out and he knows what I'm going to decide, then I have to decide that. Now it brings you to the conclusion, well, then he's either not sovereign, which is, as my friend brings up, circular reasoning, and I agree with him, it is. And I'm not just saying God is not sovereign, but we have to somewhere engage this conversation of free will and divine sovereignty. I believe it was Greg Boyd. I'll just give it to him. If not, then I'll claim it as myself, because I've asked this question enough times, 3 times to say it's mine. Does God always get his way? I'll ask that to people and say, oh yeah, God always gets his way. And then I will follow it up with this question, as I believe it is Greg Boyd does. Does God always get his way with you? Oh, no. So then God doesn't always get his way. Well, no, he gets his way. So if God sovereignty means that he knows every decision I'm going to make, then that negates free will, because now I have to. Well, you can still choose to do something else, but God will know you're going to change that. The same argument. If God knows I'm going to change my mind, then we're back to God knowing what I'm going to do. And then I have to do it, or something's wrong there. You may not agree with me, but I'm going to let you sit with it, okay? I'm just asking you to sit with it. So I remember sitting in one of my doctoral classes, and Stephen Siemens from Asbury Seminary was teaching 2 cohorts. We blended 2 cohorts, and he came to teach a class for us for a week. And I remember he said something very important regarding the omniscience of God. And he said this, if I remember correctly, he says, I don't know that God knows every decision I'm going to make. And he leaned toward not believing that God knows. Because if God's all powerful, God can choose. If he says, okay, I'm going to give human beings a free will and human freedom, give them the freedom to choose, well then that means that God can also choose to limit knowing our choices. And as God, he can do that. Okay, I don't have any problem with that. I might have my idea of sovereignty might be different and even more accurate than others. If he's all powerful and God can do anything, then God can say, you know what, I'm going to choose not to know what choice Andrew or Bob or Summer or whoever's going to make, okay? Or Mark. So, and then if you get into this, because then you get into the idea of predestination stuff. Does God, there's some people that believe that God knows who's going to get saved and who's not. Well, then the question is, those churches that believe that, why do they send missionaries? They don't need to send missionaries, as a friend of mine brought that up. But then you got to really think about they really don't need pastors either, and then you don't really need Jesus if you want to get down to it, because if God's going to save them anyway, they're going to, how about we just live the way we want to live, because we don't know which one we are, whether we're in or not. So free will, it came to me this morning as I've been pondering this, and free will changes everything. That was why Wesley was a hair's breadth from being a Calvinist. And again, I'm not saying this as a criticism. I'm having a conversation here with you, whether you're a Wesleyan or you're a Calvinist, or you don't even know the difference between them, and that's okay. The question to be begged, though, and that we have to sit, and I just used that out of context, but that's okay. It sounds cool. If you believe that God knows every decision that you're going to make, every thought you're going to have, and I know there's scriptures that say that, you know, sometimes we need to remember that some of the stuff we read in Psalms is it's poetry. It's not necessarily theology, but we have to really stop and think. If we decide that we believe in free will, we have to apply that to every aspect of our theology. Every aspect of our theology. And say, how does this fit in? As a Wesleyan, Wesley's big scripture that he loved was, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. Well, then I have to go to, well, if God has only picked some people to be saved and some people to not be saved, is it really love if it is forced? I can't tell you, okay, you will love these videos, you will love this one. This one's, I'm just talking here, folks. I can't make you like this video. A man persuaded against his will is of the same opinion still, as the old saying goes. And so, and if I said to my wife, you will marry me, you will love me the rest of my life and cherish me and all that good stuff, I'm going to tell you something. If she's doing it out of force, I'm going to be sleeping with one eye open. Okay? And it is that love. Is it love if my wife is forced to love me? Is it truly a relationship with God? And so some people are like, well, I could be saved, maybe I'm not. And so then you got to ask yourself, why should I even accept Christ as my Savior and his gift of salvation? Because if I do that, and what if I'm not one of the chosen? Then I've wasted. Well, you haven't wasted your life. The old thing says. I agree with that. Living a good life is not a bad thing. But then again, you got to argue the other way. Well, why don't we just all live the way we want? Because if I am saved, if I'm one of the chosen, the elect, then I'm going to make it anyway. So it doesn't matter. And if I'm not, then I've lived it up and I've enjoyed while I'm here on earth. So this idea of human freedom. Free will, however you want to put it, is a game changer in my thinking. It's just a game changer. So I've given you some stuff to think about today, Wind Chaser, so think about it. That is what you do with theology. You wrestle with it. That's why we call it Drash Ministries, is because you're drashing it. It's midrash. We're having a conversation. We're supposed to be discussing. And some of you will not agree with me, and that's okay. And as I have told you many times, write your theology in a pencil with a very big eraser. And maybe today some of you are going to pull out that eraser and say, I think I need to rethink this. And if so, then I'm grateful. Because we need to think about this stuff. This is causing me to do some thinking, and that's a good thing to do that. So I'm gonna kind of leave it right there, Wind Chasers, and maybe we'll revisit this a little bit more somewhere down the line. But for right now, we can agree that God is sovereign. It's just a matter of what that means, and I think it's a good thing for us to think about. It's where I get stuck on the phrase, there's that old song, God is in control. I don't like that. It sounds like we're drones. We're not drones, but God is in charge. I'm the pastor at the church I'm at. I'm in charge, but I'm not in control. I can't control anybody, but I'm in charge. I try to direct it. I try to be the one that, leads things where they need to go. There's a difference in that. So I get it raise eyebrows when people say, "Well, God, what do you mean God's not in control? Is he in control of you?" Goes to the other question: Does God always get his way? Does he get his way with you? So I'm giving you some stuff to chew on, so you can chew the cud, as they would say. Okay, and see where that goes. And if you don't want to chew the cud, go get some Twizzlers, strawberry licorice, and ponder this. Ponder this. Till next time, wind chasers, keep chasing the wind because the wind is chasing you. I'm Pastor Mark. Grace and peace.